I was not. But we met about 8 years later when we were both working at the same law firm. And I had just joined the firm. Jennifer walked down to my office looking very official and very serious and said that she had a matter she needed my help and advice with. So I took out a yellow legal pad and a pen. And then Jennifer proceeded to tell me that she was going to a wedding that weekend and needed to know whether to wear chiffon or taffeta. I advised her to wear taffeta, and thus a great friendship was born, which has lasted almost 40 years. I continue to advise her on wardrobe choices to this day. So that's how we met. A little bit about Jennifer. She was 7th grade class president at Hunter. She studied history and creative writing and dance. After Hunter, she went to Cornell University, where she continued to study history and graduated cum laude. And after that, she went to George Washington Law School, where she was editor-in-chief of the International Law Review. Her legal career has included a lot of interesting things. She started clerking for Chief Judge Brown of the 5th Circuit Court of Appeals in Houston, Texas. After that, she joined Sherman and Sterling, which is a well-known old school law firm. She was a corporate litigator. And then she founded her own law firm where she represented primarily athletic coaches and female executives who had been the victims of gender discrimination. And she did all of this before taking a new turn in her career and becoming one of the leading advocates in the country for childhood sex abuse victims and victims of child pornography. For the past decade and then some, she's been an active lobbyist and litigator. She's helped change laws, state laws across the country, and she's represented hundreds of victims. She's taken on very powerful institutions like the Catholic Church and the Boy Scouts and Rockefeller Institute. And her work's fascinating. She's very, very passionate about helping all these victims. So I thought a good place to start would just be for each of us to spend a minute or two reminiscing about Hunter. I'll tell you my story. You know, I grew up in the East Village before the East Village was so very chic and so very expensive as it is today. And my parents had a laser focus on having their children have a great education, but they didn't have the money to afford private school. So that meant that my brother had to get into Stuyvesant High School and I had to get into Hunter High School, which we did, fortunately. And I say fortunately because not only did we get a great education, but if we hadn't gotten in, our tiger mother would have killed both of us. So that was a good thing. And then at Hunter, it was just an amazing learning experience. I loved being at an all-girls school because, as I said, I was kind of dorky at the time, so I didn't have to worry about boys not liking me. And I met other dorky girls. It was great. And, you know, a lot of us became doctors and lawyers. And the teachers were so engaged. Like, I can still remember their names, their faces, courses they took. They taught us, you know, Ira Marienhoff for history, Gloria Pages for English, Madame Snepvangers for French. It was just really a magical time. There was collaboration and not competition among the students. And it makes sense in hindsight why there's so many successful and famous alumni from Hunter, because I think what was unique about the school is that everyone was encouraged to use their voice and to have confidence in their intelligence and their abilities. So looking back for me, I think I felt lucky at the time, but I didn't even realize how lucky I was to have had that opportunity. Jennifer, do you want to talk a few minutes about your experiences?
Yeah, it had some similarities. I really think that Hunter was an incredible school, and I did feel at the time, but looking back, it was even better. The school itself, the academics were incredibly strong. The teachers, I mean, I remember Miss Pages also, Mr. Taylor for social studies, Mr. Kirby, and my fabulous dance teacher. And that was terrific. And the biggest part of it, the small classes, The No Girls was great, and the biggest part of it was the Hunter girls, who were smart, sassy, and never silent. So it was a really good combination.
Yeah.
Yeah. And while I wasn't on the Lower East Side, we had the same issue in my family. We were on the Upper East Side, but it was also important for both my sister, who happens to be on this broadcast, hi Erica, and I to get into Hunter, and thankfully we did, because otherwise we were moving to Connecticut. So it would have been a very different world, because New York City was a big part of growing up. It was like a part of your life. It was another character in your life.
Yes. So let's back up a little bit and maybe tell us some of your story as a young girl growing up in New York City. Anything that leaps to mind for you about your childhood?
Well, it was always a lot. I remember always a lot of moving around, walking, motion, stimulation constantly. And, remember doing a lot of studying even then. And my big activity was going with a girlfriend to Bloomingdale's on the second floor to look at the latest fashion for young ladies or young girls. That was probably one of the more fun parts. I also spent a lot of time in summer camp, which was good, got out of the city a little bit, and that's where I learned and really honed my desire and ability to swim, which has been with me forever, and I do that to this day.
Okay. So why don't you tell us a bit about the early years of your career? I kind of touched on it, but give us a flavor of how you've done this path.
Right. Well, also everything starts with your mother, right? It started with my mom as kind of a role model, and she really was one. She was the first in her family to go to college, went to Barnard. Then she worked on the Manhattan Project, and if there are any youngsters on this call, I don't know, they were working for making the atom bomb, designing that. And then she joined a little teeny tiny startup company called IBM, where she designed computer systems. And she was really a single mom before there was such a thing as a single mom. And she was always inspiring to me and continues to be that way. So that was a really good start. And from there, after all my schooling, I did move to Houston, Texas, which was probably a very important part of my education, because not only did I learn, very different people, very different culture, very different context. There were 4 law clerks. There were 2 girls, 2 boys. The other female was a gal from Pass Christian, Mississippi. And I'd never met a Southern girl before. And within about 10 days, she had the 2 male law clerks fetching her coffee, bringing her flowers, and doing her work for her. So that was a big learning experience just to experience that. But she was a wonderful person too. And I learned a lot about the court system. It was the Fifth Circuit Appellate Court. This was one of the judges who helped desegregate the South. And also I learned how to drive, which was very important, which I know you learned later in life too, Ruth, right?
Yes. I didn't learn to drive until I had passed the bar exam and gotten married before I learned to drive.
Yeah, so that was an important thing to learn as well. And then from there, you just go on. I went to Sherman and Sterling with you, where I met you. Soon after I joined, I wasn't there that much longer than you. I'll never forget that story of how we met. And it was a really great learning experience there too. I worked a lot for a guy named John Hoffman, who was the head of the litigation department, who was the chief negotiator for the Iranian hostages. So if you're going to learn about negotiation, he's a really good person to start with. So that was a really good thing. And I also started my love affair, believe it or not, with the statute of limitations. Since one of my first cases, which no one else took really seriously, was an international banking case. I won't bore you with the details, but people basically listened to my idea and said, oh, that's nice, and patted me on the head and said, you go argue it. This is my first argument. And we won it. And it developed a whole line of cases in that area. So that was a really exciting thing, but it was all about the statute of limitations. And that's really, as you'll hear later, was going to be important for the child sex abuse work that I do today.
And that's pretty unique, because there aren't a lot of people, Jennifer, who would describe themselves as having a love affair with the statute of limitations, are there?
What can I say?
Yeah.
It's been good to me over the years, really, really good to me.
Yeah. I have to tell you also a little story about Jennifer's mother, who is really something. And the last time I saw her, we were in New York City and we were at Mr. Chow's, which is a very fun Chinese restaurant on the Upper East Side. And she had just come from, I believe, her 50th reunion at Barnard. And there were maybe like 9 of them at the reunion. And the thing that she was proudest of was not that she had lived to see her 50th reunion at Barnard, but that she was the only member of her class who was not on a walker or in a wheelchair. So that's the kind of stuff that Jennifer and Erica are made of.
Thank you very much. It's very true. She was really proud of that. And she's an unbelievable lady.
Yeah. So how did you migrate from representing large corporations at a white shoe law firm to representing individual plaintiffs against large corporations and universities and institutions?
Well, I had a really interesting, solid experience, interesting, intellectually challenging, great people at Sherman and Sterling. But towards the end of my tenure there, what turned out to be the end of my tenure there, I got kind of in a situation where one of the partners was working with me, and he basically was in arbitration, and he said, gee, take a look at these arbitrators, tell me who you think is, we should use. And I came back with my recommendations, and I picked one of the 3 that I picked was female. And he looked at me, he said, Jennifer, are you sure you want these 3? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, there's one that's female. I said, yes, I know that. And he said, well, women have a hard time with numbers, and this is a pretty big damages case, so I don't think it's going to make any sense to use her. So I was pretty stunned, but the next day I had a parade of high-level people at the firm come into my office. First was Mr. Hoffman. John Hoffman came in, apologized, then the head of personnel apologized, then the head of the firm came in and apologized. And, if I didn't know already, I knew something was up, meaning that this was not a place for me to stay, and certainly not any longer. So, but it did give me a jumping off point to what became my, focus for the next several years, as you've mentioned, which is representing women with problems with their employers, whether it's gender discrimination or bonuses or any kind of issues that happened. And it really became my focus to work for that. So I had also become tired of moving money from one pocket to another, which is basically what I felt I'd been doing.
Yeah.
Successfully, but it was no longer, it just didn't float my boat anymore.
Yeah. And do you feel like the skills you learned at Sherman and Sterling served you well when you switched to the other side?
Definitely very, very well. It was great to know how the other side thinks.
Right. And now you had one case in particular where you represented an athletic coach that I thought you might want to share with your fellow Hunter alumni.
Yeah, that was really fascinating. I represented and still in touch with the former women's basketball coach at Brooklyn College. And she had a gender discrimination claim and a sexual harassment claim. And at the 2-week trial, which we had, she testified about things like the men took a vote on the size of her breasts, the other coaches, and the fact that she was making $4,500 a year to be the head women's basketball coach, and the man was making $45,000. So we did win that case quite soundly.
Oh, great.
And it was my first experience with a client crying on the stand. But it continues to happen.
Yes, I'm sure. Now, how did you migrate from representing senior executives and athletic coaches to victims of sexual abuse? Was that a light bulb moment? Was there something in your childhood that led you down this particular path of advocacy? How did that happen?
Well, I actually had a case, a child sex abuse case, along with the cases that I represented women on in other regards. I represented a woman who actually will remain nameless, but she is a Hunter girl too. I didn't know her from there either, but and we brought a lawsuit on her behalf against her dad for child sex abuse, and knowing again that the statute of limitations was going to kill it. But we really wanted to bring it anyway, and we got bounced out of court right away. But there I was, right again with statute of limitations. So, it was kind of thinking again, the area of, employment law was interesting, but it wasn't as interesting as it was when I started, because it was become kind of a more mature area. And I was looking for something that was kind of give me a little more enthusiasm. I remember we talked about this at the time, and I started talking to a few different people. One was a woman named Marcy Hamilton, who was studying the statutes of limitations in child sex abuse, and which are incredibly short for the most part. And also a guy named Paul Cassell, who is a terrific professor at the University of Utah and a former federal district court judge. And he was telling me about the work he was doing representing victims of child pornography and child sex abuse. And I said, you know, if you ever need some help, let me know. And little did I know that that led me to, you know, many years of this, and an exciting new opportunity working with James Marsh, who is a terrific lawyer, and many others, and just on to a new thing. It was fabulous. It's been fabulous.
Yeah. Now, the Child Victims Act has been in the news a lot recently. It's one of the pivotal pieces of legislation in this area. Can you explain what that is and why it's important?
The Child Victims Act reforms the statute of limitations for child sex abuse claims. And what it does is it extends the limitations period for all victims, all survivors whose claims still alive to age 55. And statute of limitations, as many people know, is the amount of time you can bring a lawsuit. So most claims have statutes of limitations, like you bring a contract claim and you got 6 years. And in the child sex abuse area, the statute of limitations have been primarily 21 or 23 years old, which when you think about it is nuts. I mean, can you imagine being 21, 20 and bringing a lawsuit? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense at all. So, and we did some research and found that the average age of a person to come forward to bring child sex abuse claims was 52. So it was a kind of a natural thing to get into. And I guess I was old enough to be able to kind of look back at my own personal history and put some things together as to, you know, why you are who you are and what motivates you, what interests you. And I remembered, as of course I do, a very challenging, major incident when I was teeny, like about 5. My parents were still together. They subsequently got divorced, hence single mom. But my parents were together. My sister and I were in their bedroom, and they started to argue. And the arguing got louder and kind of, meaner. And my father left the room, and then he came back with a knife. And he started towards my mother. And I, not thinking, just stepped in between them, and I said to him, "Don't cut my mommy." And he stopped. And he moved back. And while it wasn't pretty, we all survived that day. And I think for me, it really showed me that I have a voice and I can use it, and it can make a difference.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting how the karma of the universe is always there and kind of circles
Mm-hmm.
back to, what you were meant to be. Having known you for a long time as a friend and seen all the different types of advocacy that you've done, this is the one that makes the most sense, feels the most like
Mm-hmm.
your cause.
Yeah, this has been terrific. Really, really an exciting place to be, working with victims and survivors and making something happen for them, which is remarkable.
Now, passing the Child Victims Act was a decades-long fight. So can you talk about what some of the challenges were of getting that passed?
Well, the challenges were things like the Catholic Church and the insurance companies, all of which lobbied very heavily against these statutes. They didn't want them to come into play. They realized that there would be major liability for them and major scrutiny. They didn't want it, for example, the Catholic Church, as they continue to do, has refused to turn over what they call, and this is their language, their secret files about these priests, where they basically just move them from parish to parish as they continue to abuse little kids. So there was tremendous opposition, and it just wasn't the time culturally, if you think about it. I mean, if I had told someone, I don't know, 8 years ago that I was working in the child sex abuse area, they probably would have said, oh, and either left my presence or said that's nice and kind of changed the subject because it was too confronting. But with the cultural shifts we've had, whether it's the Me Too movement or the other child sex abuse cases that have come forward against the coach Sandusky at Penn State, or Larry Nassar, the doctor, the Olympics that helped the Olympic girls, you know, we've seen shifts in how people realize that these things exist and how important it is to bring them out and to shine light on them. So eventually, and I guess we have to thank a little bit Donald Trump, because that is when he got elected, that is the first time that the New York State legislature became truly democratic, heavily democratic for 40 years. And as soon as they took over, they passed this legislation. The Child Victims Act got passed.
So that's a New York State law, correct?
Correct. And these are state issues, you know, because these are state claims. It's not a federal claim. It's not like bringing a case against, you know, a federal bank or something where you have federal court jurisdiction. These are state claims. It's assault, rape, negligence.
What's the landscape like throughout the country on state legislation to extend the statute of limitations?
Well, we've seen some remarkable changes. Last year was really a banner year. New York passed its statute, and then we got state after state. We've had 29 states consider seriously some kind of statute of limitations reform and pass it. And 9 windows have been open. And the window is when you've got a dead statute of limitations, which most claims in New York were, meaning you were more than 21 years old, and you revive it. And you give people a period of time, a window in which to come forward. And as a result of that window, we now have over 700 clients. Wow.
And can you tell us about some of your cases representing the victims of child sex abuse?
Well, there's all over the place, but I think of it as a 4-legged chair. There's one leg is the Catholic Church and religious institutions. Another is the Boy Scouts. A third is Rockefeller University. There was one doctor who was supposedly doing a growth study, and instead he was basically abusing little kids, mostly boys. And then there's the other, you know, which includes schools and foster care and families and all kinds of things. So that's the kind of the overview. The individual cases run the gamut. So we've got a case on behalf of a young woman who came from another country, from a country in Asia. She was brought to the United States and sexually abused here. And one of the places was in a mansion owned by a fellow she's called Jeffrey. And 9 on 71 is what she said of where the location was, and that is Jeffrey Epstein's home. So that's one. Another is an example, let's say, at Rockefeller University, one of these kids who was abused by the doctor, and the doctor had him in the room, the exam room, but he also brought the fellow's younger sister into the room and had them play a game, he said, a game called Doctor. And he basically had the little girl sexually abuse her older brother.
Yeah.
Terrible things, you know. Or we have a case against the Girl Scouts, you know, the girl who was, you know, from 11 to 14, she was basically raped by her troop leader upstate. That's kind of different kinds of cases we have.
Wow. And what's a good result for your clients? Because obviously the abuse happened a long time ago. There's nothing they can do about what happened in the past. So is it purely monetary relief? Is it vindication that it actually happened? What's a good result for them?
Well, let's be clear, because that's all really the law can give you. They can keep the law, you just have a civil claim. You no longer have what these victims would really want, which is criminal prosecution of the perpetrator. That's what they really would like. They want to put this person on notice and get their name out there so that they cannot abuse another child ever. But that's not available to us. Under our Constitution, you cannot revive criminal statutes, but you can revive civil ones. So they have, what does the law provide you? You know, it's a kind of a blunt instrument. It provides you with compensation and sometimes some equity. You can sometimes change some procedures. But what really is important is coming forward. And I find that that alone, talking to me or someone like me, sometimes I'm the first person they've told. I had someone email me this morning saying that just talking and telling his story gave him his life back. And that can be enough, is just really talking and figuring out what your rights are and making a decision. You don't even have to do anything, but at least if you have the information, you know what is best for you and you can make a decision. But, so the gamut is anything from just disclosing to a person, to an advisor, or, having a jury trial and putting it to the institution that didn't fail to protect you.
Okay, so you are now chair of an organization called Child US Advocacy. And can you tell us about that organization and what your main focus is as chair?
Well, that is the organization I'm working with Catherine Robb and also Marcy Hamilton to change these statute limitations. Sorry, that is my love affair, one of my love affairs, to change the statute limitations around the country. And we have been seeking legislative change in various states, and thankfully we've had some good success, and I'm very proud of that.
Okay. So I know as a mother, I would not be able to do what you do. I would not be able to listen to so many horror stories and absorb all the pain that continues into adulthood of child sex abuse victims. So how do you do it? And especially in such a male dominated field, like what is it like being a woman handling these cases?
Well, I think I do it because I was, as karma, it's what I'm here to do in large part. And I see it, I don't get, stuck in the story, so to speak. I see what's possible for them. I see what can happen on the other side when they make these choices and get this information and take action, because that's when depression changes, is when you're in action, when you take action. And when someone else can stand for you, you finally can feel like, gee, it wasn't my fault, and I'm going to take the burden off of my shoulders and put it on the shoulders of the person or the institution that failed me. I mean, as a woman, it's been surprising, honestly, that I'm one of the only female faces out there, senior women, who's talking about this. And it's surprising to me. I think it's changing, but it's very surprising that it's been, again, a male-dominated field.
Mm-hmm. So right now, your cause was in the headlines for a long period of time in recent history, and it's sort of been knocked off the headlines by all the turmoil in the country, COVID-19, Black Lives Matters, the upcoming election, the roller coaster economy. Has that had any impact on your work and your clients and your legislative efforts?
Well, that and Juneteenth, which we're, we are today. Well, the courts with the virus, the New York State courts were shut for several weeks. So we could make no progress on our cases. And while not only the courts were shut, but people, the survivors, the victims, they got really cut off. And a lot of them were in isolation. And what had just started to flourish, which is a sense of community and a sense that they weren't alone, well, they felt very alone again. So that's something that we're working on, to try to make sure that we can reach out to as many as we can to make sure that they're not alone. They realize they're not alone, but it really was a setback. Mm-hmm. Like it's been a setback for a lot of kids living at home. A lot of child abuse has been happening that, there's no one there to protect them.
Yeah. What do you see as the next wave of challenges in this space?
I think we're going to be working more on statute limitations, because we're not done yet. There's more to do. I also think that there's a kind of a shift in how to look at this, as children have rights, they really do. And it's kind of their civil right to be safe from danger. And that's important. I also think that the insurance companies can do more. They can do, for example, annual child sex abuse audits. to give some, ability to manage the situation. So there's a lot to do going forward.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that legislation can solve this problem or mitigate this problem? Or do you think it's, you know, cosmetic?
Well, I think that it won't eliminate pedophiles, which seems to be there. There's doing a lot of research, brain research now, and trying to understand what the motivation is for that. So that's probably not going to go away. But what can change and what is changing due to these statutes is institutions are stepping up, because otherwise they're in deep doo-doo if they don't, to try to protect children. So every youth-serving organization has to take a close look at how they are handling their children and how they are protecting them, and how they're using what we call the too deep rule to make sure there are two adults in every room with a child, things like that. So there's changes afoot.
So more about accountability than eliminating the bad apples, accountability of the institutions.
That's exactly right. It's right now we're in the accountability and responsibility and shifting the blame from the little shoulders of the kids to where that blame belongs, the institutions and the people who fail to protect them.
Yeah, because it seems like with the internet, pornography has proliferated. I mean, I remember going to a seminar where the speaker basically described the dark web as being 5 times the size of the web that you know about, and that's where criminals live, pedophiles live, pornography lives. Like, it doesn't seem like legislation can solve the underlying problem, but perhaps it can make the institutions more accountable for investigating, finding out, not covering up, getting rid of the problem on their own territory.
Well, that's a whole nother set of issues, child pornography and the basically the immunity that's been given to the internet service providers. And there's been very little incentive. They do some things to protect against child pornography and being on the net, but there's more that could be done, and there probably more that will be done if statutes like something called the EARN Act are passed, which take away some of that immunity and give some other ability to hold institutions responsible and make them participate in solving the problem.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know you were part of a legal team that went to the U.S. Supreme Court for a landmark child pornography case, and I thought your fellow Hunterites might like to know about that experience, what it was like being there, being part of something so important.
Right, in front of Justice Kagan, yes. Well, it was really pretty darn exciting, I have to say. I know you've had your own Supreme Court case recently, so we both had chances to talk about that. It's just such an august place. And it was really exciting to think about being there and getting ready to go. And we got there, and then there was this historic snowstorm where basically the city was stopped. And we had this huge dinner planned for all the friend of the court briefs, amicus curiae briefs of people that had helped us. There were 13 or 14 of them, and fantastic people and institutions. And we were concerned, that wasn't going to happen. But everybody came. Everybody came. Including, friends of mine that made an effort. My friend Barbara, who came down, got the last train from Amtrak from New York, or my cousin Judy, who came down, and my mom, who came up. So people showed up anyway. And when you get there, I know we've talked about this a little bit, it's just such a serious, august, grand, and incredibly quiet place. That's just I've been in, countless numbers of courtrooms around the country, but there ain't nothing like the Supreme Court in terms of its grandiosity, its formality, its seriousness, and its silence.
Mm-hmm. And also watching brilliant minds at work, and the rapid fire question and answer. I think you get a sense that you don't get reading the newspaper, that this is really not nearly as partisan an institution as the press would have you believe. I think we're seeing some of that now with some surprising opinions coming from some surprising justices, but these are truly brilliant constitutional scholars, regardless of which side of the political divide they're on. And they collaborate not only with each other, but with a cadre of incredibly brilliant law clerks to help them hopefully get to the right result, or at least a logical result. So
It's really true. I mean, it's really a rat-a-tat kind of question, period. So, and you got to be on your game.
yeah,
And you know, it is really the Super Bowl for lawyers, but it's still wood paneled. So
yeah,
it's an exciting place.
yeah. Wood paneled and red velvet curtains and
Hmm.
40-foot high white pilasters. Uh,
Right.
I would just say that when I had my very surprising trip to the Supreme Court, because I'm not even a litigator, but the month after that, I was in municipal court for Summit, New Jersey, because my son had been at a party of high school students and some eggs had been thrown at the neighbor's house, which of course my son didn't do, but they got all rounded up. And it was so absurd to have been at the Supreme Court a month ago and then at municipal court where you had to sit through, you know, traffic violators, wife beaters, prostitutes, and all kinds of detritus of civilization to get before the judge with your egg throwing case. So that was really
Contrast.
a real contrast in how our justice system works in this country.
Right.
So on a personal note, Jennifer, you recently moved to Florida after a lifetime as a New Yorker.
True.
And what's that like?
You know, I really love it. I love it because I get up in the morning and it's sunny and there's light and it's warm. I love all of those things. And I've been a swimmer since I was a girl and I get to swim. I went swimming this morning. So it's really, it's a beautiful place to live. And it's certainly a different atmosphere. The energy is not what it is in New York, or at least it was before COVID-19. And in a way, I'm ready for that. You know, I'm ready to, you know, have a quieter, you know, environment so that I can do what I want to do, which is, you know, help people.
Yeah. And how's your driving skills coming along? You doing better now that you're not a New York City driver?
You know, I'm not okay. I'm careful. I'm definitely careful, but you know, I'm working on it every day. You got to be careful driving, and there are a lot of older drivers down here, so be really careful with that.
One of the younger drivers down there.
Exactly.
So just circling back to your formative years at Hunter
Mhm.
High, is there any final thoughts you have about Hunter that you want to share with your fellow Hunterites?
Well, we were told, I'm sure you were told this, Ruth, that we were gifted to be at Hunter, right? We were the gifted girls to be at Hunter, the Hunter girls. But really, Hunter was a gift to us. And it was a gift in so many ways. It was a place where you could discover, you know, new things, learn new things. You could discover new people, maybe that weren't like you, or maybe were like you, and you could discover yourself. So Hunter is an extraordinary gift.
Mm-hmm. And I think it did help everyone find their voice, right?
Mhm.
Maybe because there were no boys, we felt free to speak our voice. We didn't worry what boys would think about what we said. And I think that has a lot to do with it. You
Mhm.
know, if someone wanted to get involved in child sex abuse causes or advocacy, where would they begin? What should they do?
Email me. You can call me, email me. I'm at jenniferfreeman@marsh.law. You can follow me on Twitter. You can DM me there. You can find out about childusadvocacy.org. There are lots of ways to do it, but I'm happy to talk.
Okay, good. Good. Well, I thought we'd maybe open it up to questions from the audience at this time.
Great. If there are any.
Are there any?
Oh, I think there's a hand up there. There's a hand, Karen Fitzgerald. Can we unmute you?
I'm
Hi, Karen.
Hi, Jen. How are you? Hi, Ruth.
Good. How are you?
Hi.
Thanks for being here.
Good to see you. What I always love, you won that award, I think it was last year, and I forget what
Mhm.
organization, but it was a big organization, and I love hearing the trajectory of your career because it's been astonishing to me.
Thank you.
Yes, and I don't know Jen through Hunter. I know her from a women's empowerment class that we were both involved with for many years. And first of all, I just have to say the gratitude that I have for you, because you not only bring your heart into the work that you're doing now, but you brought your heart into that room for so many of us. And you brought me out of my shell in ways that surprised us both. So anyway, the question actually, it has to do, it's sort of multi-layered. Uh, First of all, did you experience, other than that lawyer who said, women don't do numbers, did you experience discrimination as a woman, as a young woman, when you first got into the law? Yeah.
Yes, I did. I did. And some of it was, sweet. For example, the judge who I worked for, who was a wonderful man, and I admired him. He's no longer with us, and will always feel fabulous about how we had a chance to work together, and he was just a great individual and helped me teach me how to drive, or to be a better driver. And he used to call me Cupcake. Things like that would go on. I don't think they'd happen today. And I think he meant it as an endearment, but that was the kind of attitude that you'd see a lot. And there was sexual harassment. I would get gifts from male clients. I got once, I think the biggest, the most troubling was a pair of silk pajamas from one of the clients. So you had to deal with things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was always there.
Yeah. So now moving into this area of the law, why do you think it's a male-dominated cause so far, and why do you think women have hesitated to become part of it?
Well, I think that there are a lot of women in it now, young women, and because there's more work to do now with these statutes changing, with the statute of limitations. Yes, I love the statute of limitations. Changing, you can really do something about it. And before there weren't that many opportunities, and the area was basically run by certain male lawyers who did most of the work, and me.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And what drew males to it? Just because it was a huge deal, or just what do you think drew males to it?
Probably each person would have their own thing, but there are a lot of the institutional clients are male. We've got the Boy Scouts, we've got the Catholic Church, which is mostly against male victims, not entirely. So we've got even the Rockefeller University case is mostly males. So that may be one reason as well, is that a lot of the survivors are male.
Yeah.
Now, the reality is, that there are plenty of female survivors. There are plenty of female victims of child sex abuse and child pornography. There's probably more, but a lot of it is family oriented. Hello? Are we still on? The women are probably less willing to come forward because it's a family issue. And so many complicated layers about that. And they're often, the claims are not against the institutions. So in the past, the resources were not put to the females.
Wow. Thank you. And thank you for the work you're doing. I'm always astonished, as you know.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen.
Yeah.
And Jennifer, I don't know if I mentioned this, but she really has become a media spokesperson for this cause. She's been on CBS Evening News. She's been on NPR. She's been on a lot of TV and radio stations. So, if you turn on the TV, sometimes you'll see her in red or blue. I haven't seen her in any colors.
Got to go primary colors here. Well, that was a really interesting thing, learning about that. That's been kind of the fun part of the fun of doing this. Not only, just kind of navigating it, like to me, experiencing what it was like behind the scenes at MSNBC was kind of exciting. You have this adorable handler who's navigating you, and then you go to the makeup room and they put so much makeup on you, you couldn't believe it, but it doesn't look like that on television. And then you get mic'd and you sit on certain red couches where you're waiting, and then you get tapped to come in, and then the sound guy is talking to you, and then you watch, you know, the process happen. You know, you see, and you're part of it, and you're part of what's making people learn about things. So that's a great thing. That's a really, really great thing, and it's exciting. I mean, I was, you know, thrilled when, you know, Stephanie Rule was asking questions and we talked about the Rockefeller case, and I told her that we have hundreds of clients of this one doctor and her jaw was on the floor. So it's great to be kind of experiencing that. Any other questions? I hear a lot of background noise, not sure. Is someone asking a question and I can't hear it?
Hi, Jen.
Hi.
Hi, it's Lisa Stillerman. How are you?
Mrs. Stillerman, how are you?
One of my most favorite people, an absolute favorite lawyer.
Thank you.
I wanted to find out if you think that you're going to have that many more people, you know, clients, unfortunately victims against like Jeffrey Epstein or any other high profile person, that they're just going to start coming out of the woodwork, and you're not really going to expect that.
Well, for someone like Jeffrey Epstein, there are probably still some people to come forward, but that's, one would think that you would have heard about that and tried to talk to a lawyer already, but you know, there's still people who are coming forward, and that's always a possibility. And there's always, unfortunately, Lisa, there's always new, you know, examples of pedophiles who abuse little kids. So it's not over yet. And there's a fund for Epstein. So that's another opportunity that, you know, because it's different to go to a, you know, through a lawsuit. But you got to remember, if you go to a lawyer, sometimes you don't have to go to trial. Sometimes you don't have to even start a lawsuit. Sometimes we can resolve things without revealing your name, even your initials. Because if you go to court, all you have to do is reveal your initials. You don't have to reveal like your name or your identity. So we can sometimes take care of these things in ways that you maybe won't anticipate and that aren't so intrusive. So get some advice. If that's someone about you or someone you love, tell them to talk to somebody.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Ruth, is there anything else you want to cover? Tell me about, you know, your experience in the Supreme Court.
Oh, I think I held my breath for an entire hour. It was just so thrilling. I don't think I've ever sat up so straight in a chair before. And, you know, I was at counsel table. Fortunately, I was not arguing the case because I was neither competent to argue the case nor answer all those questions in rapid fire, but I had hired outside counsel. And it was just very exciting. You had to listen to every word. Mm-hmm. Some of the justices were incredibly funny, which I was not expecting. They would pose absurd hypotheticals about tomato farmers and guys named Bob, and you were trying to follow along, like what in their brain. They would tell funny anecdotes in the middle of oral argument. They had time to talk about things that had happened in their lives. I will say Neil Gorsuch is incredibly handsome in person, regardless of what you think about his political views. And I could not see Ruth Bader Ginsburg or Sotomayor because they were so tiny that I could not see heads over the bench from where I was sitting. Right. But I did see our fellow Hunter alumni, Elena Kagan, who is sharp as a tack, and it was just a pleasure to watch her work. So it was very exciting. You know, it was, as you say, it was majestic, and the experience of a lifetime.
Well, just like Hunter, an experience of a lifetime.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful to you, Ruth, and our, almost 40-year friendship, which
Yeah.
didn't directly come from Hunter. I know it's because we're Hunter girls.
Exactly. I don't think you would have liked me in high school.
Maybe you wouldn't have liked me.
Well, thank you again to the Hunter College High School Alumni Association for hosting this event. We're really thrilled to be able to do it and reconnect with some old friends.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, ladies, so much. What an amazing career, what amazing experiences. We really appreciate sharing it with us. And I put Jennifer's email in the chat if anyone wants to reach out to her. And I'm going to say goodbye to our Facebook viewers. And I'm going to leave the session on for you if you want to chat some more. Thank you, ladies, so very much again. We really, really appreciate it. It was amazing.
Thank you, and you